There is a kind of strength that has nothing to do with what you say. It lives in what you choose not to say. Today we turn to 11 Stoic lessons drawn from Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca for those of us who explain too much, defend too much, and fill silence out of fear rather than purpose. If you have ever walked away from a conversation replaying every word you didn't need to say, this one is for you. We live in a world that rewards noise. Say more, prove more, explain more, as if meaning were measured in volume, as if being understood required exhausting every possible word until nothing is left unsaid. And yet, if you look closely at the people who carry themselves with real weight, the ones whose presence alone commands a kind of quiet respect, you will notice something almost paradoxical. They do not talk more than everyone else. They talk less, considerably less. The Stoics understood something about speech that most of us have forgotten in an age of constant self-expression, that words, like any resource, lose their value when spent carelessly. Every unnecessary sentence dilutes the ones that actually matter. Every over-explanation is, in some quiet way, a small surrender of dignity, a signal that we do not trust silence to hold what we mean. This is not a lesson about becoming cold, withdrawn, or emotionally unavailable. The Stoics were not advocating for silence as suppression. They were advocating for silence as discipline. The same discipline Epictetus applied to judgment and Marcus Aurelius applied to anger. Speech, to the Stoic mind, is simply another domain where self-command matters. And like every domain of self-command, it can be trained. What follows are 11 lessons drawn from the Stoic tradition for anyone who has ever felt the quiet exhaustion of talking too much, explaining too much, defending too much, filling silence that didn't need to be filled. Lesson 1. Not every silence needs to be filled. There is an old teaching attributed to the earliest Stoic teachers that we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we might listen twice as much as we speak. It sounds almost too simple to matter, and yet most of us violate it daily without noticing. Silence, to the anxious mind, feels like a problem to solve. A pause in conversation becomes an itch we rush to scratch with words, any words, simply to relieve the discomfort of stillness. But silence is not empty. It is often the very space in which understanding happens, where the other person's words settle, where your own thoughts organize themselves before you speak. The Stoic practice here is simple, though not easy. The next time silence arrives in a conversation, resist the urge to fill it immediately. Count to 3 in your mind. Notice the discomfort and notice that it passes. What you will often find is that the silence was doing exactly what it needed to do, and your words, had you rushed to fill it, would have added nothing but noise. Lesson 2. Explaining yourself to everyone is a quiet form of self-betrayal. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself repeatedly about the temptation to seek approval and understanding from people whose opinion of him should not have mattered as much as it did. He reminded himself that the Emperor of Rome did not owe every citizen an account of his reasoning. Neither do you. When you feel the urge to explain a decision to someone who has not earned the right to question it, a stranger's judgment, an acquaintance's raised eyebrow, a family member's disapproval of a choice that was never theirs to approve, you are handing away a piece of your autonomy. You are, in that moment, treating your own judgment as something that requires external validation to be legitimate. This does not mean you owe no one an explanation, ever. Close relationships built on mutual respect often deserve context, especially where your choices affect them directly. But there is a difference between explaining out of care for a relationship and explaining out of anxiety that your decision isn't valid unless someone else agrees with it. Learn to notice which one is driving your words. Lesson 3. Defending yourself against every criticism gives it more power than it deserves. Epictetus taught that when someone insults us, it is not the insult itself that disturbs us, but our judgment about the insult. This applies directly to our compulsion to defend ourselves against every criticism, real or imagined. When you rush to defend yourself against every comment, every misunderstanding, every perceived slight, you are implicitly treating the criticism as a serious threat that requires immediate neutralization. But most criticism examined honestly does not deserve that much of your energy. Some of it is simply wrong, and wrong things do not require your defense to remain wrong. Some of it contains a small truth, and truth does not require defensiveness. It requires reflection. The Stoic response to criticism is neither silence born of suppression, nor an eager rebuttal born of wounded pride. It is a brief, honest pause. Is there truth here worth considering? If yes, consider it without shame. If no, let it pass without needing to prove out loud that it has passed. Lesson 4. The person who talks the least often understands the most. There is a particular kind of person who dominates every conversation, not out of malice, but out of an inability to tolerate not being the center of the exchange. They interrupt, they redirect, they fill every pause with their own perspective before fully absorbing what was just said to them. The Stoics valued observation as a form of wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about watching the behavior of others, not to judge them harshly, but to understand human nature more clearly so that he could respond to it with patience rather than surprise. This kind of observation requires listening, not talking. It requires the discipline to let another person finish completely, to sit with what they've said before responding, to ask a clarifying question instead of immediately offering your own experience in return. Practice this deliberately in your next conversation. Let the other person speak fully, without interrupting, without preparing your response while they are still talking. Notice how much more you actually hear when you are not simultaneously planning what to say next. Lesson 5. Oversharing is often fear. Wearing the costume of openness. There is a difference between vulnerability and oversharing, though they can look similar from the outside. Vulnerability is chosen, deliberate, and offered to people who have earned the trust to receive it. Oversharing is often compulsive, a nervous system trying to discharge anxiety by talking, regardless of whether the listener is the right person or whether the moment is the right moment. The Stoics placed enormous value on discretion, not as secrecy for its own sake, but as respect for the weight of one's own inner life. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius about the importance of choosing carefully who deserves access to our private thoughts, because trust given carelessly becomes trust wasted, and words shared indiscriminately lose the power they might have had if offered more deliberately. Before you share something deeply personal in a moment of anxious impulse, pause and ask yourself, am I sharing this because this person and this moment deserve it, or because I simply cannot tolerate holding this feeling alone for a few more minutes? The answer will tell you whether you are practicing openness or simply outsourcing your discomfort. Lesson 6. Repeating your point does not make it more true. There is a particular kind of talking too much that shows up as repetition, saying the same argument in 5 different ways because the other person's silence or disagreement feels unbearable, as though enough words might finally force agreement into existence. The Stoics understood that truth does not require volume, and persuasion does not require exhaustion. Epictetus taught his students to state their position clearly, once, with as much precision as the truth allows, and then to let it stand or fall on its own merit, rather than trying to overwhelm disagreement into submission through sheer repetition. If you find yourself saying the same thing for the 3rd or 4th time in a conversation, hoping the 5th repetition will finally land, stop. Either your point has already been heard and rejected, in which case more words will not change that. Or it has been misunderstood, in which case a different approach, not more of the same one, is needed. Repetition born of frustration rarely persuades. It only exhausts. Lesson 7. Your worth is not measured by how well you can argue your case. Many of us talk too much in moments of conflict because we have quietly come to believe that if we cannot articulate our position perfectly, we have somehow lost, not just the argument, but something about our own legitimacy. This is a trap the Stoics would have recognized immediately. Your worth was never contingent on your rhetorical skill. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire, was not concerned with winning every exchange through clever argument. He was concerned with acting rightly, regardless of whether every observer understood or agreed with his reasoning in the moment. You do not need to win every conversation to remain intact. You do not need the last word to preserve your dignity. Sometimes the most stoic response to a disagreement that isn't going anywhere productive is simply to let it rest, unresolved, without treating the lack of resolution as a personal defeat. Lesson 8. Talking too much about the past keeps you living there. There is a specific kind of over-talking that isn't about the present conversation at all. It's about narrating old grievances, replaying old conflicts verbally, retelling the same difficult story to anyone who will listen, as if the retelling might finally resolve something that words alone cannot resolve. The Stoics were remarkably disciplined about the past. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that the past is entirely outside our control, unchangeable, finished, no longer available for revision, no matter how many times we describe it to someone new. Talking extensively about old wounds can feel like processing, but at a certain point, it becomes rehearsal. Keeping the wound open through repetition rather than allowing it to close through acceptance. This does not mean past pain should never be discussed. It means noticing when the retelling has stopped serving understanding and started serving avoidance. When talking about what happened has become a substitute for actually moving past it. Lesson 9. The wise do not need to announce their progress. There is a particular kind of talking too much that shows up as self-narration, announcing every improvement, every insight, every step of personal growth, as though progress does not fully count unless it has been witnessed and acknowledged by an audience. Epictetus was notably strict about this. He warned his students against speaking constantly about philosophy and self-improvement to others, insisting that real progress shows itself through changed behavior, not through announced intentions. A person who has genuinely become more patient does not need to tell everyone they are working on patience. Their patience becomes visible on its own in how they respond when tested. If you notice the urge to narrate your own growth to others, to make sure people know you're changing, healing, improving, consider redirecting that energy into simply continuing the change itself, quietly, and letting the results speak on a timeline of their own. Lesson 9. The wise do not need to announce their progress. There is a particular kind of talking too much that shows up as self-narration, announcing every improvement, every insight, every step of personal growth, as though progress does not fully count unless it has been witnessed and acknowledged by an audience. Epictetus was notably strict about this. He warned his students against speaking constantly about philosophy and self-improvement to others, insisting that real progress shows itself through changed behavior, not through announced intentions. A person who has genuinely become more patient does not need to tell everyone they are working on patience. Their patience becomes visible on its own in how they respond when tested. If you notice the urge to narrate your own growth to others, to make sure people know you're changing, healing, improving, consider redirecting that energy into simply continuing the change itself, quietly, and letting the results speak on a timeline of their own. Lesson 11. Silence chosen, deliberately, is not absence, it is presence. The final lesson brings together everything before it. Silence practiced as a Stoic discipline is not withdrawal, it is not coldness, and it is not the passive silence of someone who has nothing to say. It is an active, deliberate choice, the decision to hold your words until they are needed, until they can do something more useful than simply relieving your own discomfort with stillness. This kind of silence carries weight precisely because it is chosen. People sense the difference between someone who is quiet because they have nothing to offer and someone who is quiet because they are exercising restraint over something they could say but have decided not to. Yet, the second kind of silence commands attention in a way that constant talking never can. This is, in the end, what all 11 lessons point toward: not less connection, not less honesty, not less depth, but more intention behind every word you choose to speak, and a growing comfort with the space around those words. Closing reflection. None of this is about becoming someone who says less out of fear or withdrawal or a desire to seem mysterious. It is about recognizing that words used carelessly lose their weight, and that the discipline of speaking less and more deliberately is one of the quietest and most enduring forms of Stoic strength. The next time you feel the pull to explain yourself further, to defend a point already made, to fill a silence that didn't ask to be filled, pause. Ask whether this next sentence is necessary, or whether it exists only to relieve your own discomfort. More often than you might expect, the answer will show you that the strongest thing you can do in that moment is nothing at all. Closing. If these lessons gave you something to sit with today, take a moment before you go. Subscribe to this channel for more reflections like this one, drawn from Stoic philosophy and built for a slower, steadier kind of life. If one of these 11 lessons stayed with you more than the others, leave a comment and let us know which one. It helps shape the reflections we bring you next. And if this video was useful to you, a like helps it reach someone else who might need to hear it today. Thank you for spending this time in silence with us.